Good evening. Wake up, wake up, wake up, everybody. 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 Instrumental of a good old classic R&B soul song. Hell Melvin and the Blue Notes featuring Teddy Pendergrass. Wake up all the teachers, time to teach a new way. Maybe then they'll listen to what you have to say. Because the one who coming up and the world is in their hands. When you teach the children, teach them the very best you can. We want to welcome you to Ministers on the Mic tonight. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. I know you're saying, how can preachers be starting off the show with that good old soul music like that good old worldly music? Well, we're preachers. We're ministers on the mic. And that's what we're going to talk about, those issues that intersect us where we live, work, and worship. And we're going to get into it tonight as we're still dealing with the awesome thought and topic of critical race theory. Its effect that it has had on so many recently. And, you know, it's something that has always been with us. So why we're talking about critical race theory? We're talking about it because it is something that is important to this country. It is something that has been overlooked far too long. And as I've said before, we wouldn't need to have what is known as critical race theory if America truly taught all of its history and valued the contributions of all of her people. But as we are witnesses in so many different cases, that is not necessarily the case. We start off always remembering First Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32, and of the tribe of Issachar, men who had understanding of the times that they might tell Israel what they ought to do. And so it is our job, is our responsibility, it's our accountability as ministers of the gospel to tell our people those things that we ought to be doing and to bring to the forefront those things that are important to us, not just as Black people, but to this country. I am Antoine Miller, pastor of the Way Christian Church of Stockton, California. My normal co-host, Pastor Raynard Hillis of the Double Rock Baptist Church of San Francisco. Keep him lifted in prayer. He is with his wife. She had surgery late last week, and so he's comforting and taking care of First Lady Hillis on this evening. And so, Pastor Hillis, we are praying for you. But, you know, they say that the Lord always has a ram in the bush. And so as we're talking about CRT tonight, I'm just grateful to be able to get one of our prominent soldiers of the gospel and of race-related issues in the Bay Area, none other than Reverend Arnold Townsend. Reverend Townsend, welcome again to Ministers on the Mic. How you doing, sir?
Thank you, Brother Miller.
Thank you.
It's great to be here. First of all,
I hear you just fine. Look like Pastor. Oh, he didn't freeze. He's just sitting still.
I'm having trouble now. Let me. Are you here?
Yeah, kind of echoey, but we're gonna come through.
I'm trying.
Oh, you're fine now. I hear you just fine.
I do better on my phone.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead, give it a shot. We'll be right here. Just sign off right here.
Let me just say I'm praying for Pastor Hillis and Lady Hillis in this hour, and I trust that everyone will do so, that she'll great recovery.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, you were breaking up there, kind of echoey again. Again, I'm just honored to have you on here with us tonight. You said some things the last time that you were on with me that still resonate in my mind, especially when you had brought up the topic of Saturday schooling our children as a way of introducing and educating them uh, for some things that they will ultimately have to face and deal with in life as a way of empowering them. Okay. All
Well,
right. So those of you that are
one
joining us
of the
tonight,
things that
huh?
we've got to keep in mind, which is, if not the most important issue in this country,
All right. Yeah, you broke up again on us, Doc.
I'm not here.
All right.
Figure it out. I, I'm wondering if I would have more success on my
Go ahead
phone,
and give it a shot.
and I'm going
Just
to
sign out.
figure that
Just
out right quick until I.
yeah, if you got your phone, go ahead. We'll just use your phone, Doc. We'll work with that.
Because I'm getting bad audio, but
Okay, could be an issue with your Wi-Fi over there. We got a couple of people that are joining in with us. Reverend Townsend, I'm gonna let you go ahead and try to get your connection straight real quick. Again, this is Ministers on the Mic, and tonight we're continuing in our discussion regarding critical race theory. Uh, and it is a most important issue. I'm gonna tease him later, y'all.
where's my, I'm trying now. You know,
Okay. All right. Well, look like you may be having some issues with your Wi-Fi over on that end. If you think your phone will work better, go ahead and just use your phone. Uh, whatever way you can get on there, just know I'm happy to have you on board with
yeah,
us.
go ahead.
Okay. All right. So earlier today, what crossed my mind when it came to the subject of critical race theory and how there is such an outright rejection and repudiation of critical race theory uh, in society. Um, what came to my mind was that critical race theory has always been a part of who we are. Um, because this country has always had some issues with race. And so, as African Americans, we have had many ways that we have addressed those issues that have concerned us, those issues that have affected us. And one of the ways that we addressed racial issues was us literally addressing it through music, and us addressing it through music. Um, we have seen that throughout time, there has been pushback by the greater society around us when it came to addressing issues of race in this country, even when it came to dealing with it in music. What I have found is that critical race theory has always been acceptable in America as long as it was entertaining. In other words, as long as it entertained those who would be viewed as oppressors of that day, critical race theory has been acceptable. So, for those that usually follow me, that have paid attention to things that I posted on my wall on Facebook today, I posted a myriad of questions, or not questions, just some simple statements about what critical race theory is. Um, and I did it from a viewpoint of what has always been acceptable to America when it came to us addressing issues of race, or what has been the easiest way for us to address those issues concerning race. And what has been the easiest way to address issues of race in this country was when we put it in music. Um, can I say real quick that putting it through music is nothing new? Addressing it through music is something that has always been somewhat acceptable to the masses. So, um, the songs that I posted, and I pray that as you are with us on this evening and you can see those songs that are posted on my Facebook wall, I simply made these bullet statements that I'll go ahead and read real quick, and why I said that these are um, critical race theory. And I'm gonna go all the way back to the first one I posted. And I believe that I posted maybe 14 or 15 of them. So I don't want to take a whole lot of time on that area, but it's important that we cover this area because it is germane to what it is we're talking about tonight. Maybe Reverend Townsend will be able to get back in here with us soon. But if not, we're going to go ahead and go for it. Your thoughts, your comments, your concerns, your questions, why don't you go ahead and just share them with us as well as we move along? The first thing that I posted today, I said Billie Holiday's song, Strange Fruit, was critical race theory in 1939. Yes, Strange Fruit was critical race theory in 1939. Why was Strange Fruit critical race theory in 1939? Well, if you've seen the U.S. versus Billie Holiday that was recently on Hulu, the movie, the U.S. Reverend Townsend is back. The U.S. versus Billie Holiday, as it was on Hulu earlier this year. We seen that when Billie Holiday made the song "Strange Fruit," it was so rejected and repudiated in that day that whenever she would open her mouth to sing that song in concert, they would be ready to arrest her. It often became a rider on her contract that she could sing her whole discography as long as she didn't sing Strange Fruit. Why? Because talking about the strange fruit that was hanging from magnolia trees in Mississippi was offensive to the very people that were hanging Negroes on magnolia trees in Mississippi. Right down to where she would have the lyrics, blood on the leaves, blood at the root. Strange Fruit was a haunting song. And to that end, as I had posted that earlier, Pastor Troy Logan, friend and brother of mine, fellow graduate of Fremont High, he says most complainers of critical race theory never read the authors of critical race theory and don't know precisely what it is they are agreeing with. And I'm going to say to Pastor Troy, I agree with you. And so, Pastor Townsend, I said that strange fruit was the critical race theory of 1939. What you think of that statement, sir?
Oh, I would wholeheartedly. I would also agree with some of the posts you made on Facebook today about music we
Uh-huh.
listened to when I was much younger was a critical race theory of that time. We have to remember that Billie Holiday, at the time Strange Fruit was written and published and, and recorded, as well as some uh, people who are dark and blue, and that till Billie Holiday sung it. Only thing that many white people thought of black music at that time was good times. They wanted to turn everything into a musical, and
They want, as you, yeah, as you're breaking up again, sir. What I did,
and it's people lack the courage, lack courage to publicly explore
all right,
over
Doc
the world.
Townsend, Doc Townsend, you
Who
are
else has gentrification the 7 continents on that? That's a heck of a thing for people to admit, but an admit.
all right, Doc Townsend, your connection again is spotty with us because I know you said a whole lot. One of the things that I did catch out of what you said in the earlier part of your statement was that the greater society wanted our music to be about the huck and buck, the minstrel show, just to entertain them. And when Billie Holiday did Strange Fruit, it was really a slap to their collective faces, in that it was a song that was substance. It was a song that had meaning. It was a song that was exposing the societal ills that were acceptable at the day. Beloved, those that are listening, remember, Strange Fruit in 1939 is only 18 years after the massacre of Black Wall Street and Greenwood District of Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's 20 years after, or 19 years after, the Red Summer of 1919 and 1920. And so Strange Fruit follows up a lot of the damage that had been going on in America at that time. And a lot of Americans who reveled in the strange fruit that hung from those southern trees uh, had a problem with this song being played, with this song being sung. And ironically, posthumously after her death, it is the best selling song of her whole discography. All right. We said strange fruit was the critical race theory of 1939. 1968, the year I got here. And 1968 was a volatile year. In 1968, April 4, we had the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. To be assassinated in the United States in Memphis, Tennessee. The end of the year, we had presidential candidate, former U.S. Attorney General Bobby Kennedy, be assassinated in Los Angeles in November of that year. And in between the assassinations of Dr. King and the assassination of Robert Kennedy, there was this song that came out by this Georgia boy. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. James Brown would say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. It was the critical race theory of 1968 with other songs that was released during that time period. As a consciousness of people began to wake up, uh, more and more black folks had no problem in addressing the race issue. And so one of the things James Brown wanted to talk about in that song was uplift of a people, lifting his people up, and his people not cowering down to white people, his people being proud of who they were, of black men and women, even in this country. So say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud was critical race theory for 1968. Now, let me say this, because I know ultimately there are those who are more conservative leaning Caucasian who would say that critical race theory is about changing mindsets, rewriting history. No, critical race theory is not about any of that. Critical race theory, let me say this for someone before you say it, and you probably already said it on one of my posts. Critical race theory is not about getting white men to deny their whiteness. Critical race theory is not about indoctrination of white children. Critical race theory is not about any of that garbage that you want to make it about. Critical race theory literally is education, educating the masses on history that is usually not in our history books. And so for those that want to bring up indoctrination and say that critical race theory is indoctrination, I mean, the very Pledge of Allegiance of this country that we give to 4-year-olds when they get to preschool, 5-year-olds in kindergartens, 6-year-olds when they're in the first grade is indoctrination, because we want them to have a blind faith to this country in spite of everything that is not right with this country. And let me say this for them also. I love America. I'm glad I am in America. I'm glad I was born American. And there's a whole lot of countries where I know I would suffer persecution for some of the thoughts, for some of the things that I have. But we're in a country where I enlisted in the Marine Corps to defend the rights of people to have a dissenting thought against what I would also call indoctrination of this country. And so say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. I know that flew in the face of a lot of Caucasians in 1968. Let's see, Pastor Townsend, you able to hear us yet? Okay. Another song that we were able to put up to that Pastor Emil Thomas.
I couldn't.
Go ahead. Yeah, Doc, whenever you talk, it goes in and out. All right. So Emil Thomas says of critical race theory, he says critical race theory is nothing new to us. It is known in our culture and community and has been discussed in homes, barbershops, beauty shops, churches, HBCUs for years, perhaps over a century. It is just the science of it has come to the academy that white folks don't like. I think we need to continue to advance it, but not surprised if white institutions fight or reject it. Their rejection of it is proof of its validity. Dr. Thomas says their rejection of it is proof of its validity. The only problem would be if we stop employing it. He says, I don't see that happening because it existed in Black thought and discourse before it had the name and the title CRT. Before there was a title of CRT, this was something that was already a part of the thought of many of us. And as attorney Kevin Oliver of Georgia said on this thought on this topic before. One of the things that is often done is that they employ the boogeyman of communism, Marxism, socialism, and they say that that's what this is about. And that's something that they do whenever it comes to something where we, as Blacks in America, Africans in America, employ a thought for the uplift of our people, for the pulling off of the covers of so much of history that had been hidden, that was not in books. When we expose that, when we go against that grain, ultimately there is someone that wants to say that it's socialist, that it's communist, that it is Marxist, that it is anything but agreeing with them. And we don't necessarily have to agree with you. White people, we don't have to agree with you. Neither do we need to justify for your approval why we think that way. And so it is a part of us. It's the part of American history they refuse to teach. Critical race theory, beloved, it is inclusive of all America and not just the white picket fence on an Ansel Adams painting. That was my reply to Dr. Emil Thomas. Let's see, we got Dr. Townsend coming back in. Let's see if we got him clearly this time, because we're moving up to our next song. Dr. Townsend, you there? All right. So 1975, there was a song that came out. And
Well,
go ahead.
it is important that we understand that in critical race theory, it's a continuing lack of courage on the part of white people that keeps them from facing and dealing with critical race theory, because it tells a sordid history that while it does not indict all white people, it indicts racism that this nation, number one, as well as white nations, have used to give themselves a superior position economically in the world.
Yeah.
It's racism that white people have used on 6 of the 7 continents, to enhance their position. And you got to face the fact that you made lynchings a picnic and a family outing where white people brought their children, took photos beside the hanging and burned and charred bodies, and made to send to their relatives that lived in other parts of the country. Unless white people can find the courage to this street, will never be healthy.
Right. Right. And they have to have the courage
Did
to
you get
deal
any
with
of
it,
that?
because it is a real issue, Doc. All right. So 1975, a group that seems like they've been making good music forever, the Isley Brothers, comes out with the song Fight the Power. Fight the Power. You've got to fight the powers that be. Um, Excellent song. Used to
We
be.
have all had to deal with issues. I, from my childhood to
All right, Dr. Townsend froze on us. Maybe it'll connect back up soon. Dr. Townsend, I had to go ahead and put you in the green room for just a second. You froze on us again. Um, he was making some important points before his unit froze up on us again. But I'm going to go through these songs that I posted and how these songs were critical race theory for that time. And the reason I say they were critical race theory for that time, these songs were able to address the issues of the day in music. So the Isley Brothers, Fight the Power. Here's one for you, Doc Townsend, if you can remember this one. Song by Stevie Wonder called Black Man, Critical Race Theory from 1976. All right, Doc Townsend, since you're having the issue,
Critical
I'm gonna go
race.
ahead and
Yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to ask, what stands out to you about?
I'm still having issues. Go ahead.
All right, if you can get through this one, Stevie Wonder song "Black Man," 1976. I said that was Stevie Wonder song "Black Man."
Yeah, I couldn't hear the last part of that.
Okay, just wanted to get your thought on it. I said that Stevie Wonder song "Black Man" was critical race theory from 1976.
That song, like so many others, and I just
Hmm.
commented on another Zoom meeting I was in, was the way we introduced critical
Hmm.
race thinking or theory to the masses.
Yeah,
We 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 didn't have really another forum. We didn't have all this social media. So the way we started each other to thinking about it was through our music. If
yeah,
you were my age, and when I was in school, if somebody called you black, that was time to fight.
hmm,
You wouldn't allow anyone to call you black. But the music said loud, I'm black and I'm proud. To black man,
yeah,
we people who are darker than blue, Curtis Mayfield.
yeah,
Everything must change. Nina Simone, Quincy Jones, George Benson. This was how we introduced critical race thinking and critical race theory to the masses at that time. That, and to be perfectly honest, the Nation of Islam, and if you went to a church, our color, that was how we dealt with it. We couldn't go to Facebook. We couldn't go to YouTube. We had none of that, but we did have music.
yeah,
And at the time, much of our music was segregated, and it was probably a healthy thing for us because until black folks started, like when Billie Holiday introduced it,
hmm,
it was in rotation at the
yeah,
major stations, Strange Fruit. Later on, James Brown was because he was making the money. But he
uh-huh,
had to get introduced. But Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud had to get introduced on black radio.
yeah. Now, another song that I had put up, because you mentioned Nina Simone, and that's the next one that I wanted to bring up. Nina Simone in 1964 wrote a song called Mississippi Goddamn. Uh, and and in that song, Mississippi Goddamn, she has a lyric
Hey,
that goes something like, uh, Georgia was wrong to her, Alabama hurt her, but Mississippi, goddamn.
Yeah.
And Nina Simone was.
That song is near and dear to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Okay. And Nina Simone, when she wrote that song, she had made the statement that she wanted to get a gun, but she wrote a song instead because she already knew what the result would be if she did get a gun for her thoughts on Mississippi. And see, for a
Well,
lot of people that's joining us.
if I could share a thought on that, I read
All right. Yeah.
something today I'm going to send you.
Okay.
It was a story that in 1918, during World War I, and black men were going off to war, South Carolina, but they quit working. White folk didn't have nobody to cook for, take care of them, to wash for them, and so forth. So they passed a law that said black women had to go to work or be arrested. So you had to
Wow.
leave your children to take care of theirs or go to jail. And that's the kind of thing that make you say South Carolina, goddamn. That's the kind of thing that when you read it, even Nina Simone was talking about.
Uh-huh.
The idea, what we always say, if you're not careful and if you don't stay prayed up, white folk can take you there. When Latrell Warriors choked his coach in Pac one, I was then mayor about it, and he said, choke. Of course, there was a big ugly furor, and Willie later apologized. But when he said every black person in America knew exactly what Willie Brown was talking about, take you there, we call them Karens. But the Karen can make you want to do something out of character.
Yeah, Karens are nothing new.
Like you said, make you want a gun, but do it. But it infuriates you when how your people are treated. Go ahead.
Yeah. So here's the line that I was talking about. Nina Simone said this, the name of this tune is Mississippi, goddamn, and I mean every word of it. Alabama got me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. And everybody knows about Mississippi, goddamn. She says you can't see it, you can't feel it, but it's in the air. I can't stand the pressure much longer. Somebody say a prayer. And then she says that refrain again. Alabama got me upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. And everybody knows about Mississippi. Goddamn. And she goes into this song. I would encourage anyone tonight, look up some of Nina Simone's music. She was a wonderful artist, and she was a proud black woman and activist who was not afraid of losing her career for what she believed in. And she'd come out on the stage and tell you exactly how she feels. When I talked about Stevie Wonder's 1976 hit, Black Man, for a whole lot of us, we didn't know that the first person to die in the Revolutionary War for the freedom of this country was Crispus Attucks, a black man. For those that remember how the song starts off, the first man to die for the flag we now hold high was a black man. And it was talking about Crispus Attucks. And for some of us, that revelation came on the Richard Pryor variety show when he had Stevie Wonder as his musical guest and
Yeah.
had children that was on stage singing the song with him. Because after that line, I looked at my great grandmother and asked, is that true? A black man was the first one to die for this country? But we bring up critical race theory because these are things that they don't necessarily like teaching in school. All right. Here's another one. In 1964, anyone that's
What,
seen,
what,
go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
All right. So 1964, if anyone on here has seen the
No,
movie
I
One
want to
Night
hear
in
that. Go ahead.
Miami, and it's an account of what may have taken place in a motel room with Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Sam Cooke, and Malcolm X. And as these four gentlemen was in that room, the conversation came up in that room about a song that was resonating about racism in America. And the song that resonated about racism in America was Bob Dylan's Blowing in the Wind. Answer, my friend, and blowing in the wind. And it infuriated Sam Cooke to where Sam Cooke made his song in response to that, a change gonna come. And we're familiar with a change gonna come. Y'all, if I could sing it for you tonight, I would sing it, but I'll just say the words. Hey, Corey, welcome to the show tonight. He says, I was born by the river in a little tent, and like that river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. And it had to do with the fact that his music as a black man being the number one soul singer at that time was not readily acceptable when it came to singing about the conditions of blacks in America the way Bob Dylan's was. In other words, Bob Dylan sung a song, it sold a lot of records. Sam Cooke would sing a song and it didn't do so well. And this was another song this was a song that would get its greatest popularity posthumously as it became popular more so after the death of Sam Cooke. Change gonna come. And that's all we're talking about when it comes to critical race theory. We're talking about a change in educating. In other words, that change in educating that we're bringing up is that you've got to tell the whole story. America, you've got to tell not just the good as it makes you look good, but you got to tell the good, the bad, the ugly in order for everyone to appreciate the beautiful. You know, as states are outlawing the sharing or the teaching of what is being called critical race theory. I said this before, I'll say it again. It's interesting. Texas will say you can't teach anything about critical race theory. But in their textbooks, they're teaching that slaves came as immigrants when no slave came here as an immigrant by choice. They were what that former
Right.
word was, slave. They were brought here in chains. They were subject to involuntary servitude to white people. And no, don't give us a rosy picture of the antebellum South looking like those Negroes were happy to be there. We have to talk about critical race theory. We have to talk about the history of racism in this country because, as I shared earlier in this year, you've got a police chief in Georgia who, along with one of his captains, was busted on camera saying, at least during slavery, they had jobs. We gave them shelter. We fed them. They had clothes on their backs. And now it seems, since they're free, they don't want to do nothing. Y'all, that was the chief of police of a police department that made that statement. And These are the same people that are offended at the very thought of saying we've got to have or we should share critical race theory in our schools. We have to talk about these issues because these issues must be addressed. You mean it's fine to keep someone who is so critical of the black race in the position of police chief that wants to say, well, at least in slavery they had jobs because we gave them food and we gave them shelter and we gave them clothes? Nah, I don't think so.
Well,
I really don't think so.
well,
And
see,
so,
he talks like he talks like they didn't have all that stuff in Africa. They had
mm-hmm,
food, they had
mm-hmm,
shelter, they had
mm-hmm,
stuff to do, work.
mm-hmm.
Here's the thing. Critical race theory teaches, and got ourselves as black people, and when I'm working with you everywhere around them, they didn't go to Africa and get slaves. They got human beings and made
Right.
them slaves. The people
Yes.
that they got were the equivalent of counselors, teachers, professors, doctors, lawyers, whatever role they called them there. Those were the people that they got.
Absolutely.
They wasn't standing on the show up, somebody show up and put us away. Had stuff to now building their nation, building their families, building their communities.
Uh-huh.
And they were kidnapped by force from that. So this idea that there were people in Africa that wasn't doing nothing anyway, and we brought them here and took care of them, is the most ridiculous thing one could ever hear. It's absolutely insane. This idea that you would talk about what you gave them, they didn't need you to give them anything. They were living in the most fertile place on earth. They didn't need.
All right. We had both timed out there for a second, Doc.
No problem. Yeah, but anyway, that's exactly all I wanted to say was it's about understanding what this nation did, both number one to the growth of Africa. Keep in mind, here's the thing that critical race theory teaches. When they went to Africa, they looked for the best. They didn't bring nobody who was healthy. They didn't bring anybody who was crippled. They got on the ship to enough to survive in those horrid conditions, to get here, to be strong enough
Uh-huh.
both mentally and physically, had to be the best. What if those minds for the last 400 years had stayed in Africa, building Africa? When you look at what African Americans have created and invented here, suppose they had been doing all that in Africa, where would Africa be and where would the United States be? Without slave labor, where would, and next to slave labor, when you think about Jim Crow, is where would this country be without it? And where would Africa be if it still had those minds, those brilliant minds, and that energy, rather than having some of the best people in Africa ripped out of it so they could no longer contribute to their natural society? Think about it. Think about it.
Starting to getting in some increasing problem stream. I'm going to real quick say thank you for taking the time to be on here with me tonight. There's a whole lot to cover, but technology is getting in the way of technology tonight.
Yeah. Next time we'll do better.
All right. Thank you, Dr. All right. So if this stream will stay up, I'm just going to run through some things so that we could try to get to an end to this in a decent way. Technology is great, but the technology is not perfect. So here's some more songs that I called critical race theory for their day. Gil Scott Heron, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, 1971. That was critical race theory for 1971. Um, Stevie Wonder in 1980 wrote the song Happy Birthday, and I know we sing it at a lot of Black birthdays when we're celebrating our loved ones. But Stevie Wonder wrote that song, and it was very courageous in writing that song because it was at a time where the nation was at a crossroads as to whether or not there was going to be a national holiday for the celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he wrote that song in honor of Dr. King, and many of us know that for many years, the state of Arizona continually voted, the people voted for it to not be a holiday because they didn't think that the contributions of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Were worthy of a national holiday. That's how deeply seated the racism was in that time. Another song that we put up, and this goes to my generation. NWA wrote a song, F the Police, in 1989. And I know that F the Police had brought a lot of criticism as because of the language that was in the song, because of the nature of the group, other songs that they had written, other raps that they had. But please understand, there was a reason that song was written. That song was written because they were speaking from their experiences of young Black men in Compton, California, being sweated by the police everywhere they went. And there are a lot of people that really don't understand what it's like to get pulled over for the sole purpose that you were Black. I've been pulled over because I was Black. I've been racially profiled. I've been handcuffed. On that curb with my hands behind my back while my license was being ran and being told the lie that Antoine Miller was a person of interest. I've sat there while my car has been searched, my stuff had been thrown out. And so when NWA writes the song, y'all, for 1989, it was critical race theory of the day because they were talking about the experiences of Black people in interacting with police. And that wasn't just for 1969. That's going through the history of this country where it had been a problem. Another rap that was critical race theory. Same title as the Isley Brothers 1975 hit, but this time 1989 as well. Public Enemy writes the song Fight the Power. And one of the lines that continue to stick in my mind from the rapper Chuck D, the MC, as we used to call him at that day. See, we used to call him MC, not just rapper, but the MC on the song. Chuck D said Elvis was a hero to most, but he never meant blank to me. You see, straight up racist. The mother was simple and plain. He said, yeah, and John Wayne. He said, because I'm Black and I'm politically amped. Most of my heroes appear on those stamps. And at that time, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I think, was the first and only one that was on a stamp at that day. I'm no stamp collector. I could be wrong, but I am only familiar with Dr. King being on a stamp during that day. Here is a critical race theory song from way back in 1900. Critical race theory in 1900. Listen to this song. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. What song is that? Lift every voice and sing. That is also known as the National Black Anthem, written by James and John Johnson. It is important for us to understand the reason why they would write a national black anthem, because they recognize that the national anthem wasn't for them. Why would they write the national black anthem? Because in the America's national that literally talk about the killing of hirelings and slave, that there's no peace, only graves for the hireling and slave. That third stanza of the national anthem of the United States is never sung, but y'all, it is a part of the song, because when Francis Scott Key wrote that song, he wrote it as a tribute to America as it stood at that day. Thank God for evolution of a person like Francis Scott Key, because he was one that, as a lawyer, did go to court on behalf of slaves and former slaves. Another song that sparks critical race theory for us, and this is a good one, y'all. Larry Holmes, when he was the heavyweight champion of the world, this would be the song that would be on his way to the ring. McFadden and Whitehead, ain't no stopping us now. And the song says, there have been so many things that's held us down, but now it looks like things are finally coming around. I know we got a long, long way to go, and where we'll end up, I don't know. McFadden and Whitehead's song was literally an ode to what we would call critical race theory. Understand, critical race theory is something that has always been a part of us as Africans here in America, because we recognize once again that the whole history of America, especially when it relates to us, has not been told. We talking about the half that has never been told, so tell it all. Here's another great song that invokes the of critical race theory. 1970, the legendary, the gifted, the talented, wonderful Donny Hathaway, to be young, gifted, and black. That coming on the heels of a 2-year run, I'm Black and I'm Proud by James Brown. This song fell into the 70s and filled a void in the life of many young people. Why would it fill a void in the life of many young people? Because Donny Hathaway was singing from the heart to the heart of other young black men and women who, just like him, had heard they were nothing but N-words, had heard that there's no hope for them, had heard that they didn't have to. But Donny Hathaway writes a song, he puts some music to it, and he tells us that you are young, gifted, and black. And to everyone that's joining us here tonight, I want you to know, whether you are 880, you are yet still young, gifted, and black. And thank God for what it was he has gifted you to be able to have. Here's a song that also invokes that spirit of critical race theory. And this is where my Caucasian friends want to come in and push against it. But Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, Wake Up Everybody. Y'all know the words to the song, Wake Up Everybody. No more sleeping in bed. No more backwards thinking. Time for thinking ahead. And of course, Tom Walker would come on in. Come on in here, Thomas. Thomas, tell us your thoughts on tonight. Thomas says, did that song seek to instill guilt and shame by the accident of pigment? See, Tom, if you're a believer in God, like you say you are, and I'm not going to question whether or not you are, but you say you're a believer in God, then pigment is not accident. Pigment is by divine providence. You have the white skin that you have, and I have the brown skin that I have, because we serve an all-knowing God that gifted us and blessed us in different ways to be different from one another, right down to the pigmentation of our skin. So no, that song does not seek to instill guilt nor shame by the accident of pigment, my good lighter than pigmented friend. However, this is a country where white Americans did impose laws and restrict the freedoms of people based on what? Pigmentation of skin. Because you see, because of pigmentation of skin, there was a time I could not go and drink from certain water fountains. There was a time where if I had to use the Louvre, the WC, the water closet, the bathroom, I wouldn't be able to use the facilities that was inside the establishment, but there was an old outhouse way back yonder that they would let a poor old Negro like me go and use. There was a time where people like me, because of pigmentation, had to stand at the back of the bus. But I want to be fair to everything that Thomas is trying to say on tonight. Tom says, Antoine, there is no white America. There is no black America. There is just America. There is no question that the United States once had discriminatory laws, overwhelmingly a function of Democrats. And I'm going to agree with you there. However, the positions of Democrats and Republicans have changed since that time. You have to be honest with that. Which needs to be repeatedly stressed because they somehow seem to escape blame. And you've never heard me let a Democrat off the hook for the damage of Democrats to Black America. But I digress. Let me continue, because they somehow seem to escape the blame which is rightfully theirs, rather than smearing all Americans of certain pigment or pigmentation. Do you believe that school children should be made to see everything through the prism of race, and that they should be made to carry the burdens of guilt and shame for things they had nothing to do with? Thomas, nobody is talking about school children sharing or carrying the burden or the blame for what was done in generations past. But you have got to be honest on tonight that those school children will benefit from things that were done in the past that yet still has its effects or its lingering effects in 2001. What do you mean, you want to ask Thomas, those lingering effects? Well, the wealth gap in America between Black America and white America, and I know you said there's only America, so let's put it this way. The wealth gap between Blacks in America and whites in America is this. Black American wealth has been topped out at about $7,000, in some places $17,000. For white Americans, it's $171,000. The difference in that is property ownership. Property ownership. So why does that have lingering effects, Thomas? I'm glad you asked. Even though you're not on here, you probably wouldn't be on here. I would love to have you on here one night where you could go ahead and honestly share your thoughts. However, because there was redlining in the past, because Blacks were not allowed to buy in certain neighborhoods and banks would not loan to them at certain times, there are lingering effects. And then when you look at situations such as Rosewood in Florida, Okasee, Florida, when you look at Longview, Texas, when you look at dare I say, Elaine, Arkansas, Chicago, Illinois, even what we commemorated on last week, the massacre of Black Wall Street and Tulsa, Oklahoma. All of those are places, and I could name you another 30 places where white people had killed Blacks or taken over their land or forced them away. However, the land that the people had at that time, they were swindled out of, forced to sell it. And so there are lingering effects of those things. So no, they don't have to bear the burden of those things that were done that was wrong in times past. But watch this, they get to benefit they get to be blessed or benefited by those things that were done wrong in the past. And whenever someone can benefit from a wrong, Tom, will you be honest enough to admit that you ought not benefit from a wrong? Those wrongs must be corrected. Those wrongs must be fixed, even if it's only in teaching the history that white children otherwise would not learn. So, Tom, tell me why in Oklahoma it is not part of the curriculum, the massacre of 1921. Why is it? Because Republicans who are running the legislature of Oklahoma. As you point out, Democrats of the past, I'll point out Republicans of the nasty here and now. Republicans have made it unlawful to teach the history of Black Wall Street for fear it would offend the white students of Oklahoma. And I do believe that if you pass enough pictures around of the Black bodies and the white faces that stood around, of those bodies that were burned and hung and dragged behind horses and mules and trucks, sooner or later in some of those areas, someone's going to see a picture of Grandpa. Someone's going to see a picture of great grandpa. Someone's going to want to know the truth of that. And as Reverend Townsend had said earlier, those events were turned into postcards and shared with Americans all over the country. So while that song, Wake Up Everybody, does not seek to instill guilt, there is a segment of America that would love to roll back the clock and put the so-called Negro in its place. And I know I've gone over my time, but a couple more. Another song from my generation, Ice Cube, 1991, Summer Vacation. And someone will gasp, Ice Cube, Summer Vacation? Yes, Ice Cube, Summer Vacation. That is one of the most real rap songs that have ever been made, that tells one of the most real stories that there ever is. And it literally shares how Crips and Bloods migrated from South Central Los Angeles into other parts of the country. And one of the reasons they did that is because they recognized the lack of opportunity to find jobs in their neighborhoods, and they picked up drugs. Now, that's something I would not have done. I had the same opportunities to get into illegal, illicit drug trade like those in South Carolina, but thank God that was not my story. Earth, Wind, and Fire writes a song called Kalimba in 1974. Critical race theory. Someone said, huh? Kalimba? The Kalimba story? Critical? Yes, because it introduced many Africans in America, blacks in America, to a traditional Zimbabwean instrument that we may not have ever heard of before. And it was called a kalimba. And he said, Kalimba, could you play me a tune? I know. That's why my agent don't let me sing in public. 1978, Bob Marley writes a song called Buffalo Soldiers. It comes out in 1983 after his death. One of the most popular songs ever written by Bob Marley. And Buffalo Soldiers literally tells the story of the Buffalo Soldiers of the late 1800s, early 1900s, men that were soldiers in the United States services, who did a whole lot of the work in securing freedom in a country where they would die never being 100% free. And for many people, they didn't know about Buffalo Soldiers until the song came out. And then I'm going to end with this one, because this is a song that is sung by whites and blacks, Asians, Latinos. And it's a song that is pretty much the embodiment of what we would call the gospel. And there are many that would say black people should not sing this song because this song was written by a slave trader. And the song that I'm speaking of was written in 1772. 1772. It was published in 1779. And this song was by former slave trader John Newton. And you are all familiar with it. Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, now am found, blind, but now I see. When John Newton writes those words, it's after a man who had lived a non-religious life accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. But before he accepted Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, he was involved in the slave trade. He brought Africans from West Africa to England. That's how he made his money, his wealth, and he was doing pretty doggone good. But conviction in Christ Jesus let him see the error of his ways, and he turned his back on the slave trade. And as he turned his back on the slave trade and walked further and further in his life with Christ, uh, amazing things begin to happen. And first and foremost of those being that he began to lose his eyesight. And as he lost his eyesight, he pens those words, "Was blind, but now I see." He looks back over his life, and John Newton realizes that the whole slave trade was wrong. Beloved, probably the earliest song that gives us a thought of critical race theory would be Amazing Grace, because this was a white man who seen that he was wrong, that the slave trade was wrong, and he would come to think of it as the most vile thing that another human could do. And I mentioned the white man, the Englishman, John Newton, because it takes all of us, white, black, no matter what the race is, to push the cause of freedom and to make sure that all history is taught, that our children, no matter what their race is, can have a well-balanced education on the contributions of all Americans. See, critical race theory would not just expose the great things that blacks did, but critical race theory would also expose the great things that Asians did in America. Critical race theory would talk about those coolies that helped lay down train tracks into the West. It would talk about the history of Chinese and Japanese in America and their contributions here. It would talk about the rich history of Latinos and Hispanics that were here before the Caucasian Americans got here. It would talk about all of that. It would share the good, the bad, and again, the ugly. John Newton, in writing the song Amazing Grace, probably one of the most beautiful hymns to ever had been written, and it affects billions around the world since 1779 when it was published. So great was the effect of the song Amazing Grace that it had an effect on a young man who was in Parliament in England by the name of John Wilberforce. John Wilberforce was moved by the song Amazing Grace and wanted to get to know John Newton for himself because he heard the story of John Newton and him now being a lightweight abolitionist, so to say. And the reason I say lightweight was simply because in losing his sight, he couldn't do what he probably would have been able to do. But John Wilberforce becomes a champion for the cause of getting rid of slavery in England. And after many years of being in Parliament, after losing his wife, his family, John Wilberforce never came off that battlefield in demanding that Africans that were in England would be free. What John Wilberforce did in England, beloved, freed the slaves, but it had an effect on abolitionists here in the 1800s. It had an effect once he read about it on an abolitionist by the name of Frederick Douglass. It had an effect on an abolitionist by the name of John Brown. And John Brown was a white man who killed white people over letting black people free. Such was the effect of John Newton's ministry and song, Amazing Grace, and what it did in the life of John Wilberforce. In Dayton, Ohio, there is the only HBCU, historically black college and university in Dayton, Ohio, that is named after a white man. And that university is Wilberforce University. which on last week in its graduating ceremony, its dean and president stood up and announced that all debts for the graduating class of 2020 and 2021 were forgiven. Music, my brothers and dear sisters, has a way of evoking thought, motivating, and moving us to action. Music, when the lyrics are right and the intent is right, can cause us to make great change. And so I shared all of these songs, and Reverend Townsend tried to share with me as best he could. We had problems with the connection, but all of these songs and so many more that we share today literally invokes the spirit and the thought of what critical race theory is. Critical race theory is not about indoctrinating people. Critical race theory, again, is not about getting white people to deny their whiteness, white men to deny their white manhood, or any white person to deny their privilege. Critical race theory, my brothers and dear sisters, is what we used to simply just call Black history. Critical race theory, Black history have both been besmirched by those that say it's unneeded by simply saying it was communist. And so, as I get ready to close tonight, and I know I went over my time, I want to thank you for hanging out with me. I will champion the cause for critical race theory. I'll champion the cause for African American, Black American history and studies in this country. But at the same time, when it comes to critical race theory, I'm not only fighting, I'm not only championing for the African American, I'm championing, beloved, for the Hispanic, for the Asian, for that one that is viewed as a minority who, in the history books of this country, their contributions have been marginalized and minimized. And oftentimes, their accomplishments had been taken and someone else given the credit for. You know, when you look all over this country and you see stoplights, I don't know if Garrett Morgan or Morgan Garrett had children, but his invention of the stoplight has saved billions of lives around the world. His family should have never wanted for anything. Critical race theory would cause us to look at George Washington Carver, a brilliant man, brilliant scientist, who was adopted by a white family. Before you go, oh, because that white family had a daughter, they had him castrated. So all of the inventions that he did, all of his discoveries in agriculture, right down to peanut butter, there was no one for him to leave that legacy to, except for the white family that adopted him and castrated him. They won't teach you that in school, but critical race theory would highlight what they did to George Washington Carver. You know, it's a shame that there are many who, because of race, was not treated in many hospitals. Dr. Daniel B. Hale, first open heart surgery. I didn't learn it in public schools, y'all. I had to find that for myself. Dr. Charles Drew, blood transfusion, plasma preservation. But yet, according to legend, he died in need of a blood transfusion. Ain't that something? So I'll continue to champion that cause, that we would recognize the contributions of all of America's people and not just highlight for a few. That's going to be my time tonight. Thank y'all for hanging out with me just a little later than usual. Beloved, you all have a great evening. And again, this is Ministers on the Mic. And like those of Issachar, men who were aware of the times, that they might tell Israel what they ought to do. Y'all have a blessed night. God bless. We'll see you next week. Pastor Hillis, we're praying with you. Mary Hillis, his wife, had her surgery, continuing to pray for her swift recovery. And as Pastor Hillis told me, things are going well. Keep them lifted in prayer. Lift up Pastor Hillis' family still, as mom is in hospice care. We're praying for Raynard Hillis and his brother Raymond and the entire Hillis family. God bless you. Peace.